I think we're going to have lunch after this. So, yeah.
Thank you all for joining me. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining us for another Bdaily webinar. For those of you who haven't actually tuned into our webinar series before, I'm Jamie Hardesty. I'm the editor of Bdaily Business News. Essentially, we host these sessions to explore topical issues, and we're lucky enough to have a panel of expert speakers from the business community on board, which is great. Today's webinar, of course, comes in partnership with Northumbria University, where we'll be discussing leadership and management. So if you're here for the leadership and management discussion today, you're in the right place. If not, and you've stumbled here, I suggest you stay. It's going to be great. We're going to have some fun today. Okay, so essentially, some of our key focus areas are going to revolve around this subject of responsible leadership, what it takes to become and develop into a responsible leader. But we're going to have a real focus today on female leadership, and we're going to be addressing why, there aren't as many women leaders in business as there are in men. Certainly that's a case where we are in the Northeast business community. But yes, before I start, I'd like to just take a second to describe the format of today's session, as well as introducing our speakers who we have with us. So essentially, I'll be facilitating the views of each speaker individually before we open up at the end and to our panel. We'll be opening up questions from our audience, or sort of the questions that I'll be attributing to each of our speakers. So yes, I won't keep us. So without further ado, I'll introduce our experts. So we're lucky enough that we've got Professor Jamie Callahan from Northumbria University. Jamie's a veteran of the US Air Force. She came to the Human Resource Department through a role as a personnel officer and member of the Pentagon Air Staff Total Quality Consultancy Team. Jamie's also the former editor of Human Resource Development Review, and she's published more than 150 works, and also has numerous awards to her name as well. So welcome, Jamie.
Thanks.
Equally, from another from Northumbria University, we've got Dr. Jenny Davidson with us. Jenny's got 20 years of experience working and carrying out research in the field of sustainability, having held a number of senior sustainability roles in both public and private sectors, latterly at Heathrow Airport for BAE and Oxford City Council. We also have John Beattie with us. He is a business development manager in the creative learning and engagement team at 7 Stories, which is the National Centre for Children's Books here in Newcastle. John's got over 10 years experience in the education and culture fields, very passionately working to balance meaningful audience engagement opportunities and social impact with organisational sustainability and resilience. And finally, we have Holly Shield-Redfern, who many Bdalians will know. She's the commercial director at Explain Market Research. So a little bit about Holly. Holly is also from our Northumbria University contingency. She's a law graduate. She's worked in the regional SME business community for the last 9 years now, focusing on the development and delivery of growth strategies. So yes, they are our speakers, and I'm quite happy to just dive straight in today, everybody. So yeah, let's go for it. So first up, we'll have Professor Jamie Callahan talking to us. Are you there, Jamie?
I am indeed.
Excellent, excellent. Well, I'd like to begin by talking about responsible leadership, and we'll build from there. In your opinion, Jamie, what are sort of the 3 key ingredients which make a responsible leader?
Sure. Jenny and I will probably tag team off, of each other quite a bit.
Excellent. That's fine by me.
We do a good bit of work together, and my areas of interest are around gender and leadership, and Jenny does a lot of work on responsible leadership. Thank you. And so when I come at this question, I come at it from kind of an emancipatory leadership perspective, and I think of the responsible leader or the emancipatory leader, and I like to do things in alliteration and give you something to think about. So the three ingredients that I think of are trust, humility, and equity. And when I look at it from that perspective, I'm really looking at trust, where leaders are minimizing their presence in decision making, that they're taking that out to their followers. In humility, they're willing to acknowledge that they have their own weaknesses, that they can't answer everything, and that they're willing to get help. They're willing to take that risk to speak out. And equity, they recognize and they challenge unequal power perspectives and power relationships in the organization. And all of those things, I come at it, as I said, from an emancipatory approach. And it links very nicely to work that Jenny does on responsible leadership, where they're finding that risk, a willingness to take risk, is really important. And if you use a risk-making kind of risk decision-making assessment framework, you find that people who are willing to take risks along things like trusting people to make decisions, being humility and willing to be vulnerable to put yourself out there, being willing to challenge unequal power relationships, those things are related to the risk. So if you think about it as then it's an easy way to remember some of those three key ingredients.
Okay. So taking into account what you say there, I mean, there's this debate, isn't there, whether leaders are born or made. How would you weigh in on that?
The answer is yes. Yeah, in a nutshell, leaders are both born and they're made. You know, my field is human resource development, and the very foundations of that field are about learning, development, and growth. And so I think I'm predisposed to think that leaders can be developed. But the literature also does support that. There's so many different approaches to help people understand how to relate to other individuals more. So we're born with some predisposed kinds of abilities to do certain things. Yeah. They can also develop, and we can help people learn. Otherwise, we wouldn't be in the business that we're in, which is teaching people how to become leaders.
Very good point. Very good point. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about actually transitioning to the leadership position. So whether you're in a business, whether you're in an institution, can you describe some of the barriers an individual might face when becoming a leader? Yeah,
I thought I'd keep it short and sweet to the extent that I can. Dogbert, the consultant, talks about how a really good consultant can do things in a 2x2 matrix, and a 3x3 means they're really good. So I'm going to give you 3.
Okay.
So the first thing is probably the most important one is they have to learn to cultivate a sponsorship. And that's not just a mentorship, that's really is finding someone who's willing to champion them. And Stella Nkomo talks a lot about that in her work, especially with women becoming leaders and women of color becoming leaders, but also men as well. Anyone who moves into a leadership position has to find someone who's willing to champion them amongst other leaders in the organizations. And we're finding with the work of Bono and some of her colleagues that that's especially difficult for women. Another one is they've got to learn to focus in a more broad way. Instead of being narrowly focused on the tasks that they're responsible for within their divisions, within their scope of work, they have to think much more strategically. And that's a really hard shift to make. You've earned that position as being a leader because you've been really good at what you've done, is generally how that gets you on the radar screen. And so the ability to shift that focus and take in perspectives of a lot of differing components within the organization is really difficult to do. And the last one, which I think is a broader impact, is being seen as a leader by yourself and by others. And that's one of the places where development can come in handy. But very often what happens to leaders, especially if they're transitioning within the same organization, is that everyone around them sees them as their buddy, the person who's on the line with them on the front line, and transitioning to be seen as a as from a follower to a leader becomes really important in your own belief about yourself as a leader and their belief about you as a leader.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So you've touched on gender there, and you've alluded to belief. So I would really like to explore that a little bit more. How influential, therefore, is this role of belief? Would you agree, or would you say that men carry a greater sense of self-efficacy than women do?
Oh, I'm going to take it back to the first part of the question in that role of belief. My first question is belief of whom? It depends. I'll give you an example of how I see the way belief comes into our understanding about who can be a leader and who can't. So recently, there's just been a quite a news blow up around the pay gap amongst women and female and male presenters at BBC. And one of the arguments that some of the people have written about to justify why there might be a gender pay gap was that viewers believed that female presenters were worth less, and therefore decision makers at the organization actually then acted as if they were worthless, going from worth less to worthless. So they're making less money. And women and men do not inherently carry a different sense of self-efficacy. But going back to research on something called learned helplessness by Seligman, it still appears where we can continually and consistently receive subtle and lots of times not so subtle messages that women are not supposed to be leaders, that women shouldn't take on that role. And so those messages get sent to both women and men. And so both of us, or both groups, begin to believe that. And that goes back to a long established theory of how our context and the messages we receive from our context tell us what we should think or do about our identity. And so my argument is that gendering starts very early. Think of the Disney films and the way that it proposes how girls should be versus boys should be. So we get those messages strongly. And I argue that no, men don't naturally carry a different sense of self-efficacy than women do. But we are consistently taught that we're supposed to, or that there is a difference. And it's our job as educators here at the university and as community members and leaders in the community to start to change people's belief sets about that and show that women can be leaders. And women are leaders, not can be, that women are leaders and that their skill sets are valued in organizations. And so that's one of the key things that we're trying to do here at Northumbria. And I hope your viewers get that sense that yes, women can be leaders and women have just as much self-efficacy as men do.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jamie. I'm going to sort of shift the conversation over now to John and weigh him in. Hi, John, are you with us?
Hi, Jamie, how are you doing?
I'm great, thanks. I'm good, mate. Thank you. Okay, well, sort of following on from Jamie's comments there, I'd be interested to hear your views. I mean, would you say that women make better leaders than men do? I mean, many would argue that females are naturally responsible and receptive, but, you know, thinking about what Jamie's just described there, how would you react to that?
Completely the same. I think it's unfair and unreasonable to say that gender is a main influencer when it comes to what makes a good leader. Surely it comes down to characteristics, skills, abilities. I'm very lucky in an organisation where the workforce is predominantly female, and I see the great benefits that can bring. Our senior management team, when we were set up, was an all-female senior management team, and they have achieved exceptional things. I love being part of a team where I am in the minority in terms of gender. It's quite a nice flip, and makes things really, really interesting for me because I get to learn so much more about how to work with individuals. What Jamie was saying earlier about taking from your context and learning from your context and how that can shape you and how you work and how you lead. I definitely feel that where I am.
Okay. No, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. I mean, obviously we've talked a lot about gender so far. It's not the be all and end all of today's discussion. I would sort of like to look at it genderless for a second here and talk about actually sort of transitioning and developing into a leader. Now, I mean, we heard from Jamie talk about her sort of 3 key pillars about sort of transitioning into that leadership position. But I mean, coming at it as a huge advocate, well known for being passionate about education and learning, how easy or sort of how difficult even is the sort of the 10 years of professional development alongside your working career?
I'm gonna possibly blow this one out of the water and say I'm really lucky. It's not that difficult. he says, spending a lot of time doing CPD. We are a learning organisation. We believe firmly that the way that we can become the best that we can be and that we can achieve our aims and goals is that everybody is able to do their jobs, that everybody has the training and the support that they need. So since I started at 7 Stories nearly 2 years ago in this role, I have done a lot of training, learning about arts and culture sector, but specifically around learning and engagement opportunities and how we can better help individuals engage with what it is that we do and how that can be meaningful in the moment, but also in their lives. Moving forward, it's actually really interesting, as Jamie was speaking about transitioning to leadership. I was taking loads of notes. Thanks, Jamie. That's been really helpful.
We'll communicate.
Yeah, I will be getting in touch very soon. I am looking to start my MBA with Northumbria in September.
Oh, congratulations.
I'm really excited about it and pretending that it won't take up my entire life. And
we're excited and it won't.
But I'm really looking forward to it. I know it will be a challenge, but I know that the benefits of being able to learn separate to my workplace, but also apply it in a realistic way is, yeah, the benefits are just going to outweigh the time it takes. In terms of cultivating a sponsor, again, very, very lucky that I work in an organisation where we believe in development and in leadership development and succession planning. So for me, I guess it is quite easy. Finding the right opportunities can be the trickiest part. Finding something that is relevant for a whole team is very tricky when you have a team, as we do, who are creative practitioners, but also project planners, they are evaluators, and finding the right kind of program for them can be a little tricky.
Right. Okay. So, focusing on the skills side of this, then, can effective leadership act as a transitional skill, or do leadership traits only lend themselves to one's current role?
No, they're definitely a transitional skill. I, before this role, actually worked for a few colleges in kind of careers, information, advice, and guidance type roles, and working with young people to help them understand the benefits of transferable skills and that actually one job can look very different to another. And leadership is one of those key skills, being able to effectively lead, being able to effectively kind of get folks going, get people psyched up, get people wanting to work and willing to work, but providing them with the right support to do that is something that you can use in any role, whether it be the one that I currently have or whether it be moving on to something completely different.
Okay. I'm quite conscious that so far, we've talked a lot about leadership on an individual basis, but of course, I think we must look at this as a collective as well. So, I mean, how difficult is it for organisations to lead responsibly themselves while still trying to achieve their sort of commercial targets? Is it tough to strike that balance?
Yeah, it really, really can be. Our kind of main goal here at 7 Stories is to get every child reading, to encourage a love of reading for pleasure, because we know that the benefits for that are huge and lifelong. Doing that, getting out into schools, creating brilliant exhibitions in our visitor centre, going on the road, bringing authors to us, inevitably takes money. And balancing that want to do the right thing, that need to make sure that children have the best experience that they can find a book that they love or find a book that they don't love and put it down and have the confidence to go and find something else is key to what we do. We believe that every child has the right to do that. How do you do that without any money? It's really, really tricky for us to do, and it's something that I have been trying to kind of grapple with in terms of the work that we do with the education market over the last 2 years. And it is something that is very tricky. I believe we do it quite well. I believe we can do it a lot better, which is where I'm hoping that Jamie and Jenny will be able to help me figure out the more complicated stuff.
Excellent. Okay, with that, I think it's a perfect opportunity to go back to our Northumbria ladies and introduce Jenny. Jenny, are you still with us? Yes?
Yes, we are, yeah.
Excellent. I mean, we heard from Jamie at the start talk about her 3 key ingredients. Now, you both don't exactly come from the same background, so I think we'd be very interested to hear sort of what you think are the 3 key ingredients needed to become a responsible leader.
Yeah, sure. I mean, so my perspective is really coming as someone who has spent most of their career as a practitioner, working in a role where you are in that responsible leadership place, really, where you're trying to make the whole organisation much more responsible. I think what we know, both from practice but also from research, is that responsible leaders tend to be very in tune with their own values and beliefs, and very authentic as leaders. So they tend to enact those values and beliefs in their job, in their day job. And so we see that responsible leaders increasingly are able to align those with those values of the organisations that they're working in. And sometimes that can cause tension, because actually if you're a responsible leader and actually you don't believe and you don't share the same values as the organisation that you're working in, you're perhaps not in the right organisation, to be perfectly frank. But it can work beautifully when you are. And then I think probably to build on what Jamie has already spoken about, and talk about the research we've been doing recently with a cohort of students, postgraduate students who are working, all working students that are studying part-time with us, looking at how responsible leadership really does manifest itself and what it looks like in the workplace, and how you know when someone's being responsible. And quite by mistake, we've stumbled across this idea that there is something about propensity for taking risk and how people view risk.
Yeah.
And being really comfortable with really pushing the boundaries and moving out of your comfort zone. So some of the examples that Jamie gave around, really demonstrating a trust, or not being afraid to say, I don't understand this. The humility around, it being okay for things to go wrong, for example. So I suppose the concrete stuff is around about what responsible leaders look like, is around very clear about their own personal values and being able to align those with organisations. But what's emerging for us in our research is understanding a little bit more about how people then view the decisions that they're making, and how good they are, and feeling a bit uncomfortable, really pushing the boundaries.
Sure. Okay. I mean, from my experience, I mean, here in the Northeast, I interview hundreds of MDs, of people high up in business, and we've got some absolutely fantastic female leaders who are here. I mean, our MD Sarah, she's a female leader in her own right. I mean, what I would say is, whilst we do have some fantastic talent, there's certainly, and it would be wrong if we didn't say it, there is a huge gap that exists between certainly the quantity of men and women. So, I mean, what I'm really keen to understand is how we can help develop our female leaders further, and how do you think we can actually sort of close that gap?
I mean, I would echo what you said. And anecdotally, Jamie, I'm new to the Northeast. You can probably tell I'm not a Geordie.
Right.
And you can tell I'm not from here either.
But and anecdotally, I can see that. Yeah, I completely agree. We've got some great women leaders in senior positions within larger organisations, and also, I mean, I would say we've got a lot of women running their own businesses and doing it for themselves in the Northeast. So I suppose, in terms of talking about what needs to be done, I would start by saying we need to do more of what is happening already. So whatever's making that happen, we need to do more of that, and then unpick and understand why barriers are to making that happen more. I think there are some really interesting conversations around perhaps some of the challenges that women face in their career that manifest themselves practically, which I've experienced personally, which I think are very easy to remove in terms of barriers to taking on leadership positions. So there's always more to do, but I would really say we need to start with looking at why it's working, where it's working, and replicating that, rather than trying to recreate something new.
Yeah. Okay. Well, in that sense, I want to sort of move the conversation back towards what we had with Jamie at the start. Mm-hmm. And talk a little bit about belief again, because I mean, there's women and men, they are just as talented, but I think a lot of people would argue that men, and this is generically speaking, sees opportunities more so than women. So I mean, there must be something around this sort of belief culture. I mean, are we really saying that women do carry enough belief by the by as men do?
Well, it's a good question, and regionally we're working within the region. We're working with lots of different groups of women, but there's one group in particular. We're running a women's leader program, and we're looking at how women's beliefs about their identity as a leader, on what they are, and how they view themselves. And so I'm hoping that in the next year or two, we would actually have some concrete answers as to how women in the North East view themselves and what their beliefs are around them as leaders.
Yes. Okay.
And part of what we're doing in this particular study that Jenny's referring to, we are looking at how the leadership development programs that we're working are helping them change their self-perceptions about themselves as leaders.
Okay.
So we have the first round of data. We're now collecting the second round. So hopefully within the next 6 months or so, we'll be able to share more details about how we see their beliefs about themselves changing.
Okay.
And if I can just add as well to that, just to a point you made, Jamie, about
Which Jamie?
Not you, Jamie.
Okay.
Boy, Jamie. Male Jamie.
Yeah. Interviewer Jamie.
Interviewer Jamie.
Panelist Jamie.
Yeah. So the point about men and women being equally talented, I think, is absolutely right. I think it's also I think for me, the root part of the question around belief and women's efficacy is about valuing the talents and the skills that they do have, which may be different to those of male colleagues. So and getting that recognised and having that kind of captured in the same way. So that was just an aside, really, going back to
that's great. I mean, you know, I think it's obvious to say when we look at leadership in general that if you become a leader in your business, you're going to achieve, you know, a higher job position and ultimately a greater salary. But there's so many more benefits than just sort of arbitrarily looking at it like that. Could you talk us, just to summarise this part of the webinar, could you talk us through what the benefits of becoming a responsible leader are apart from that?
I guess from my perspective, looking for responsible leaders from an organisation perspective is all about helping to achieve some of those big global challenges, because responsible leaders are really good at that bigger picture, having a global perspective on things and bringing that right down to their day-to-day, work, their operations, their tasks. So from my background, I'd be saying being a more responsible leader is going to mean that we are tackling some of those big global challenges around gender inequality, wealth distribution, climate change. But I think the benefits of becoming a more responsible leader or being a more responsible leader are also reflected in they're intrinsic. If you can align your own values with those of the organisation that you're working with, you will be more effective, more efficient, and happier and more content. And isn't that what we're all looking for in our work-life balance? I mean,
sure.
and I think there's also, of course, we touched on this earlier, more responsible businesses require more responsible leaders, and that does have an impact on the bottom line for those businesses. We are seeing that increasingly in terms of long-term profits, but also attracting investors and things like that. So from an organisational perspective, there's tons of benefits, and we could go on and talk about the performance of the FTSE for Good or the Dow Jones.
Okay. Well, no, that's brilliant. Thank you. I mean, I want to shift over. I'm quite conscious we'll move on to Holly next. Holly, can I have a wave?
Hello. Hi.
Hello. Okay. So just to jump straight in, we've heard a lot from the panel so far about how we cultivate responsible leaders, and sort of how I think we can help sort of drive up more sort of female entrepreneurship and leadership. I mean, environmental factors seem to be huge here. So I mean, it would be great as someone who is working in the SME marketplace if you could weigh in sort of on company culture and business ethos. How important are they to responsible leadership?
Sure, thanks, Jamie. I think it's incredibly important. I think my starting point really is that the culture of a company is set by the leader. So an effective leader will spend time to explore and really understand the natural value of a business and its ethos. I think in my experience as well, it's probably worthwhile saying that culture means different things to different people.
Okay.
So for me, the culture within a business can change and vary depending on the leader and the leadership style. That's almost a key takeaway, if you like. And I think the principles of success, what's right and wrong, how the business operates, its real core ethos, its tone of voice, is often quite heavily aligned to a leadership style. In my experience, actually, I think what's also incredibly important is the role of the leadership team within a business. So there is that leader that's setting the direction of travel, but actually, in my view, the strengths often align to a leadership team, who I almost see as stewards of a company culture. So their role is then to embed that operationally in all they do. And I think what's really resonated, particularly from Jamie quite early on this morning, is that quite often it's the leadership team that has the time to invest, particularly in some of the younger teams. And I think in my experience, I've been incredibly fortunate in my career to date that I've had people that have invested time in me. So the value that I've actually ascribed to myself has never really been questioned. And I think we almost, as leaders, as responsible leaders, owe that to the businesses that we work in and the people that work for us. And I think as well, company culture and ethos, it's really all about how you react, and I do massively align to the perception of risk, but how you react when things are good and when things are tough. So how you respond to difficult clients, how you respond to a good day and a bad day, because everybody's always watching, even when you think they're not. Everybody's always watching. They're looking to follow your tone, and I think where I've come across businesses that have a problem with culture or really understanding what their core values or ethos are, it tends to be that there's an issue with the leadership style, and it tends to, if you follow the track back, quite often company culture or any issues relating to company culture are linked to the leader.
Yeah. Okay. So we're talking about, how important culture is, how important the ethos is. And I mean, at the end of the day, businesses are businesses.
Sure.
They're there for monetary gain. We all have targets. Should business leaders ever value results with clients higher than they value the results with, rather their relationships with their employees?
I think it's a really, really interesting question. I think fundamentally for a business to deliver and be successful, they need to have an excellent team of people, whether you're a manufacturing business or whether you're a consultancy business, and that team of people needs to effectively deliver for clients. So I'd probably look at it in two separate ways. So as an employee, from an employee's perspective, I think an effective leader will understand how to get the best out of their team, how to manage them to get effective results for clients. And in a client-facing business, that's incredibly important. And also, employees want to deliver. They want to deliver for a leader. They want to excel and be part of something successful. So if the culture and ethos is in place, it should really be a two-way thing. And I think as well, from a client perspective, a client needs to know that an effective leader will oversee and make sure that the job will be delivered successfully. But also, clients want to work with engaged, intelligent, positive teams.
Yeah.
And clients are also going to be looking at how is this business managed, and that will come back down to the leadership style. So I don't think a leader can ever value a client more than an employee, but they have a responsibility to effectively manage teams to deliver for clients.
Yeah.
And the other side of that, from a business perspective, and it resonates with SME and larger corporates, is that if you haven't got an engaged team of people, one of the biggest issues that businesses face, and I know that this is it certainly resonates with the Northeast business community, is the recruitment and retention of good people.
Yes.
So if you're constantly putting clients perhaps before the way that you engage and manage a team, then that will impact on retention and also your employer brand. So I think they really go hand in hand, Jamie.
Okay. I mean, many people who are sort of tuning in today, you know, they might be in leadership positions themselves, that they might not be. You know, we might have, I'm assuming we'll have a lot of people who've worked for different organizations. I mean, anecdotally speaking, I can, you know, talk about my own experiences, which have been good, which have been bad, you know. What I really, I think what would be really interesting from you, Holly, would be to talk about, you know, sort of the ingredients about what makes an effective partnership, therefore, between a leader and their team.
Yeah, I think, again, I can only speak from my experience, but people naturally align to people. They want to follow a vision and they want to believe in values, and I think that's where an effective leader, again, going back to our other panelists today, I absolutely agree with the points that you've made, because it's about an effective leader has the ability, they have that real human element, and it's that people align to, and when there's that alignment, you get success. So again, in my experience, the leaders that I've worked alongside and with, they actually are very good at understanding how they're perceived, and they know what their qualities are, but they also know very well the skills and qualities and traits of their team.
Yeah.
And it comes back down to that effective management of team. And I think that something that I've certainly learned so far in my career is that a good leader is fair, and they have consistent commitment. So even when the chips are down, there's a commitment to achieve, there's a commitment to collaborate and to do what they say they're going to do, and actually then that leads again to success. And then I guess two other things that sit quite strongly with me are respect and integrity. Absolutely. So although that sounds like a given, to be respected, I think you've actually got to be respectful. You've got to be honest and fair, and these are really simple, almost seem too obvious to say, but actually that they're incredibly important. And it's not actually about necessarily treating everybody the same, but it's about being consistently fair in how you approach situations, and then again, the excellent leaders that I've worked with and alongside have been inspiring. They've been optimistic, and again, going back to Jamie's point, they absolutely know how to effectively manage risk, and that's really important in a business perspective. They can push results, but their eye is also on effective risk management and mitigation.
Okay, so to interject and to pick up on this fairness point, because I think this is so intriguing. You know, from your experience, when we're thinking about fairness and gender, are women more effective and more fair when dealing with women? Are men more effective and fair when dealing with men? I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Are women more capable of being fair and effective than men are, would you say?
Sure. Again, and I'm speaking from my experience and my interaction in business, it absolutely comes back down to people and their own self-awareness. So in the current role that I'm in within Explain Market Research, I work with an all-female management team, and I've been in the business now for 6 months, and their ability to engage and deliver is incredibly high. Before that, I worked in an all-male professional partnership business, and actually it comes back down to how effective people are and their own leadership style. So although there are definitely different traits of male and female leaders, I think it actually comes back down to you understanding yourself as a leader, and understanding how to be effective and what your limitations are. So it's really mixed. I don't actually feel that in my experience to date I can answer that, because even looking at the Northeast business community and the individuals that I've worked alongside and built relationships with, I've been incredibly fortunate to work with some exceptional female leaders who are incredibly inspirational, but also some fantastic male leaders, and it does come back down to the traits and qualities of the individuals.
Okay. I'd like to actually just sort of shift back to John for a second before I introduce some panel questions here. So picking up on what Holly said there, John, I mean, you know, Holly's saying it very much depends on the people themselves, which I'm sure, you know, of course we would all agree with. I mean, now you're in a situation where you're working for an organisation which is predominantly female, and you know, you mentioned before how much you're enjoying that. Just to touch on your experience for a second, therefore, I asked the same question to you. Would you say that women are fairer or more effective leaders than men are?
No, I agree completely with Holly. It comes down to the individual. It's so much about a person and how a person interacts with other people. I have had fantastic experiences of working with female and male leaders. I've also had some less than fantastic experiences working with both genders, and it very much comes back to people. Okay, right, thanks for that, John. I've just been given some questions from our viewers, so I'll just take a selection of these. Some are linked directly to our panelists, others will be up for debate. So we've got from Nicola Short here. Nicola is a female leader, certainly in the Northeast, very respected, very well connected, and someone that's great to have as a viewer of today's webinar. So this, Nicola says, what she's talking about here is linking to a lot that Jenny has said. So I'd like to come to Jenny on this one to begin with, please. So what can we do in the Northeast to encourage more women to move into leadership roles, whether within an organisation or running their own business? Jenny, could you touch on what you were saying before again, please, about the sort of work that you're doing at Northumbria?
Yeah, sure. And can I just also say an unsolicited hello to Nicola, because I haven't seen her for ages. Great question. I mean, I think part of the solution has got to be in us doing some of this research actually around how women view themselves and how they identify as leaders in the Northeast in particular. And we've got that on the go. I don't know if Jamie wants to jump in on that detail in a minute, but I think really understanding how women view themselves in the Northeast, how they're getting to where they're getting to and why, and what some of those barriers might be, and whether some of that is region specific versus some of the more generic research that we know about things like women's self-efficacy, for example, and some of the other, you know, some of the more generic barriers that there are to women climbing the career ladder and or setting up their own businesses. Jamie,
she could feel me breathing, going, yes, I have more. I think one of the things too that becomes really important is I've done some work in the U.S. With one of my former students, looking at how young people come to their ideas about themselves as leaders. Yeah. And we're involved here at Northumbria. We're involved with the Northeast Women's Leadership Program for high school. What is high school? Sixth form?
Sixth form, yeah.
Sixth form students, whole new language. Who knew I needed an English language translator? Working with sixth form students and women in particular to help them see themselves as leaders. Because, you know, I talked about the Disney influence and influences on us at a very early age. Well, these are people who are going to become leaders in organizations at some time. The earlier we can connect with them, and looking at the work that Don is doing as well, the earlier we can connect with them and begin to give them images of themselves see themselves as leaders, and images that we give to them so that they can begin to see women as viable leaders, they're going to move into leadership positions later. So I think any opportunity we have to A, study, there are some of the factors, but B, also do earlier interventions so that when women are confronted with opportunities, they see them, they're aware of them, and they're excited about taking them.
Can I add a couple of practical things to that as well, really quickly? No, it's really practical, but from a kind of personal perspective, I guess. The first thing is women are excellent at networking and and I think we do it very naturally often. And building on what a point that Jamie made earlier about also about finding mentors and sponsors to help develop. So I know there are lots of networks for women around the Northeast already, but I just wonder if there's something around that. And there's some leverage in there, which sort of segues into my second point, which again is I've referred to before. I'd like to see a shift away, and this isn't a Northeast thing, this is a general thing, around from trying to fix the women.
Oh, thank you.
I think the women need fixing. I think we got it, and we just need to do it more. So I think maybe thinking about just making that small shift around how to help the women, because I think quite often the solutions are there. There are environmental barriers that perhaps need removing. So maybe some work around that would be interesting. But that mentoring, the sponsorship and the networking thing, I think is a real natural inclination that women do very well, and I think we could do more of.
Okay. That actually naturally leads me to an absolutely brilliant question that's come in here. I mean, I would like to hear everyone's thoughts on this. So if you would just like to raise your hand after I finish the question, and I can come to you. But this is a really, really great question from one of our audience members. This comes from Kelly Patterson, and Kelly says, leadership traits valued by our society are very gendered. For example, it values assertive leaders, regards assertiveness as a male trait, and actually runs down women who exhibit such traits. So for example, women being called bossy or worse, so, derogatory names like ball breaker. It's no wonder that many women are less confident about putting themselves forward. So Kelly asks, how do we transform attitudes around leadership and gender? And specifically, do we actually value the correct traits in a leader in the first place? Now, I think that's super interesting. Do we value the correct traits in a leader in the first place? Would anyone like to weigh in on that?
You should do that.
Yeah, Holly, go to Holly.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that one. I think it actually comes back down to I'm a real believer that as business leaders and as individuals that work in business, it's our role to embed that culture within a business, that the opportunity is there, and actually it's about working with all individuals in a business to help them understand what they excel at and what traits they have that enable them to be an effective leader. And I think it's also really worthwhile saying leadership isn't for everybody. Not everybody is going to necessarily be a natural leader, but as leaders, our role is to make everybody the best that can possibly be within a business. And I think the traits of an effective leader is to work with their team to get the best results for them, to enable them to be the best that they can be.
Okay. Thanks, Holly. Would anyone else like to weigh in on that one?
John, you had your hand up a little while ago. You want to hit it?
Go on,
yeah,
John.
I was just thinking, I find it really interesting language that we use on kind of different genders. So the phrases that came through there from Kelly, challenging language and challenging the way that people use language to perceive essentially the same trait or the same characteristic is so important. We, again, in the organisation I work in, we are firm believers in equality, we are believers in diversity, and we action as often and as frequently as we can. But we're so aware of the language that we use and the way that we speak to people and the way that we speak about people and people's actions and people's kind of things that we've been asked to do or ways that we've been spoken to. And I guess it's a bit of a bugbear for me that we can so easily and so flippantly use derogatory language or flippant comments for women that for men we would never use. So I think challenging that within the workplace is really important.
Okay.
Can I tag team off of that, Jamie?
Yes, absolutely.
Jenny and I were just joking because I wrote down two things.
Yeah.
And the first one was language. So I want to tag team off of what John was saying and give you some practical examples. And you heard me do one of them when Jenny and I were sitting here, and I said, which Jamie? And Jenny said, boy Jamie and girl Jamie. And I said, interviewer Jamie and panelist Jamie.
Yeah.
So
I would have preferred man Jamie rather than boy Jamie, but
what,
no, continue.
What was that last one?
I think I said
I would have preferred.
Man. Oh, okay, man. Even worse. No. Male, female, gendered. So one of the ways that we talk about in culture change is the idea of use the language that privileges what you want to see happen. So for example, one of the things that I have noticed since I've been here is we talk a lot about when Jenny and I first met, she had just come back off of mat leave. And I was like, what's mat leave? And so I never use the words maternity leave or paternity leave or adoptive leave. I use the idea of parental leave, because in all of those, they're parents. And in all of in using that one term, we are not gendering the term. So what that does is it leaves space for us to see men and women and other transgenders. It leaves us the opportunity to look at gendered in a more equitable way. And again, doing those subtle things of degendering our language and positions is an example of how we start to change that language. The other thing that I wanted to bring up has to do with language as well, and it's something that some people call verbal jujitsu. And part of it is this idea of finding someone to be on your team. And in most cases, the person who's in a position of power in an organization tend to be men, tend to be white men. And so if I'm attending a meeting, as what very frequently happens, a woman brings up a great idea and everybody just goes, yeah, right, and glosses over it. And then down the three spaces over, some guy brings up the same idea, a man brings up the same idea, and everybody in the room goes, wow, Bob, that was a great idea, awesome, super, but it was the same thing that I had just brought up. So what's really helpful is to have someone kind of turnabout play on that language, an ally, so to speak. And it's better if it's a man, and that man will speak up and say, wow, Bob, that was a great idea, the way you picked up on what Jamie just said a little while ago. How might you extend what Jamie was saying into a different way of looking at this? So what he's done is he's recognized me, and he has challenged that someone else has taken up that idea and given me credit and brought this other person into it from a different angle. So those are two ways that we might be able to begin to change the way we think of language as it associates with women versus men. Okay.
I'd like to move on. I mean, from our panel, from our audience so far, we've had a lot of sort of gender-specific questions. I'd like to sort of go back to what we were originally talking about, which was the sort of development side of things. So we've got a question here from Des Kennedy. Des owns a branding organization in Newcastle. And his question is, Des says, I agree that the gap between male and female leaders must be addressed, but does the panel see a difference between management and leadership? I think that's a really good sort of way to take the conversation now, sort of as we come to our climax. So would anyone like to weigh in on that, the difference between management and leadership? Come on, John, but I think we'll have something from you here. Let's hear it.
So again, as a manager working in an organisation, we very much look to our management team to be leaders in their individual areas, in their kind of parts of the business and parts of the organisation. Anyone can lead, as far as I'm concerned. You do not have to be a member of the elusive senior leadership team to lead on something. Equally, you do not need to be a leader in order to manage. So we have gone through quite an interesting time recently where we're looking at where different parts of responsibility lie within the organisation and where different roles may move and how we may kind of chop and change things a little bit better to make us more effective, to make us a little bit lighter on our feet and a little bit smarter. And that's involved shifting not just workload and tasks, but also shifting coordination, management and leadership for different things. There is a difference between the two, but I don't believe that anyone should just be a leader or a manager.
Okay, Holly, how would you respond to that?
I think it's a great question. I think it comes back down to that responsibility for stewardship, which I touched on. So I think there has to be a collaborative vision and aim. Now that could be company culture, that could be a business plan, that could be a client project. But for things to be effectively delivered, there needs that buy-in and stewardship. Now that can come from an effective leader, but in my experience, quite often an effective leader will engage with their team managers, with a manager of a project, with a key client manager, to make sure that projects are effectively delivered. So I think there's a link, but I don't think that they necessarily go hand in hand.
Okay. Ladies?
So there are two primary schools of thought around this question. The first is, this is a dichotomy. It's like men, women. Is there a difference between men, women? And I think the idea kind of goes, my way of looking at it goes back a little bit to what John was saying. I think it's a false dichotomy. I think that they do go hand in hand, as Holly just said. A traditional way of looking at the difference, and I don't necessarily ascribe to this, but I'll share with you this way, is that managers do things right and leaders do the right things.
Okay.
And I believe that both of them are interconnected. I don't necessarily think that you are a manager or you are a leader. I think there's plenty of research that's been done since that classic saying that shows that you really need to have both skills to be effective in an organization.
And I think in terms of how we see it, that question being manifested when businesses come to us and ask us to help to develop programs with them for their staff and for their employees, it's rare that organizations come to us and say, we want you to create a management program. It tends to be around leadership and developing leadership skills.
Yeah.
So even for those individuals who aren't in leadership roles, organizations typically want people to be behaving like leaders in their within the scope of what they're doing. And I think that probably helps to kind of dissect what we mean by leader and versus manager, because in practice I think we can all exhibit leadership behaviors, and that tends to be where the development needs are.
I think that's a really interesting point, and I think just again going back to my experience working in growth businesses, I think it's our responsibility to also understand the value, and I think it's very, very similar to the male-female argument that actually some of the most effective people within a business as it's growing are the individuals that are managing it and are effectively managing people. Now, the ability to effectively manage people, in my view, is actually harder than embedding leadership traits within individuals within a business. Those individuals that actually can effectively manage projects, can effectively manage client relationships and teams of people are quite often missed and at times undervalued. And I think responsible leaders look at the structure of a business and they understand who within the business has the traits to deliver what to achieve the end goal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you for that. I'm very aware that we're almost out of time. It's a shame as well, because we do actually have some more questions, but I believe that for our audience anyway, all the details will be shared with all of our speakers. If you can't see them through the medium of what you're watching, please get in touch with me. For those of you who don't know me, I am Jamie Hardesty, editor of Bdaily. My email address is simply jamie.hardesty@bdaily.co.uk. I do encourage that you follow up with our speakers today, who have provided some brilliant and really, really insightful answers. I've got all of their details, so I can easily and happily pass on to you. In terms of how we look at leadership, certainly within the female community, especially here in the Northeast, that's been something that I've personally been really, really passionate about since being at Bdaily. We spend a lot of time, really homing in on female entrepreneurs and leaders within the business community. And by no means would we ever, not look for those views. And I think that, I wish we could go on a little longer, actually, because I would like to go back to the guys. But I think we are going in the right direction. I think clearly the work that certainly what our speakers have said from Northumbria University, there's a lot of research, especially going into sort of culture and environment and ecosystems, as to how we can encourage sort of growing female leadership, because it's ultimately a benefit for us all. But as I say, we are over time now, and I would just like to say a genuine thank you to all of us 4 speakers who have provided some incredible insights this morning. So thank you very much for that, guys. As soon as I hear anything from any of our audience members, I can pass that over to you. But yes, I would just like to leave that there and say thank you very much. Well done.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody.
Thanks.
Take care all.